Meet Lino, a masterful car mechanic, modifying a turquoise Renault Clio. He can transform any ordinary car into a tech-savvy battering ram. He meets his younger brother, Quentin, in the alleyway, and while driving, they gaze their eyes on a jewelry store that they are planning to rob. Lino plans to smash the car into the door of the jewelry store and steal whatever they can, so he revs up his engine and shoots his car towards the store's front, but sadly his car fails to stop, crashing through all the walls that get in their way, finally smashing into a van parked on the other side of the road. His seatbelt gets stuck, and the blaring sirens of the police surround them, so Lino tells Quentin to flee while he stays behind to serve time for his crime. While in prison, police officer Charis, who is after a criminal gang, that Go Fast, is looking for Lino. It seems that he wants Lino's help for an official job. He wants him to modify the cars of their police team, allowing them to balance their power with that of the Go Fast group, which has been crushing their patrol cars and crew. Now, he seeks Lino's expertise to help improve their fleet of vehicles to fight back against the vicious criminals. Lino agrees to help, and in return, his labor will count as time served for the good of the country, and he'll receive better sentencing terms. After tuning up his first car, Charis and his assistant Julia, who likes Lino a little more than just professionally, go on to hunt down the identified members of the Go Fast gang, who are speeding in a BMW. The modified car is taking damage successfully, keeping up with the wild chase, when suddenly, another police car hits the bandits' car head-on, totaling the BMW, and wasting the two members inside. Inside the car, the police find a large bag of money, and Charis gets his hands on an unusual homemade speeding device. The next morning, Charis comes to a police garage, where Lino is working. Charis gives him the good news, that with his help, the police were able to track down Go Fast. Charis then shows Lino the invention he found in the car of the captured Go Fast gang and wonders what it is. Lino explains that it's an injection shunt, that gives 300% more power to the engine, but explodes after 200 meters. Charis says he only ever saw such a device in his Clio, on the day he was arrested, and hints that Lino's brother Quentin, who makes such shunts, could be working for the Go Fast gang. He asks Lino to come with him to check out one of the garages at the auto junkyard, where the criminals are allegedly based. Once there, Charis can't contact his team for backup, so he sends Lino to investigate the case alone. Unexpectedly, Lino meets his brother Quentin in the garage, and confronts his accomplices, who threaten him and kick him out, but find themselves under the gun when Charis comes to the rescue. Orsky and Marco joins the scene, coming for backup, and with a sigh of relief, Charis picks up Quentin and Lino. They're about to leave, when suddenly Orsky, looking tense, deliberately shoots at the car to prevent Quentin from leaving, and shoots his boss Charis. Lino, seeing Charis's body, is in shock and panic, and he picks up the gun from the car's dashboard and runs away. Marco orders Lino to burn Charis's car, but Lino removes his electronic bracelet and runs to a gas station with a gun in his hand. He approaches the gas station manager and asks to make a call. The frightened manager immediately calls the police, and Lino is apprehended. At the police station, they identify Lino as the mechanic they have been searching for, but they cannot locate Charis. Lino requests to speak only with Julia, whom he worked with on their team. However, instead of Julia, Orsky enters the interrogation room, which surprises Lino. Orsky turns off the camera and demands that Lino provide false testimony and protect him and Marco. He threatens to use evidence against Lino in front of his colleagues if he refuses. Orsky presents the situation as if Charis is missing, and Lino is held at the station until the circumstances are cleared up. Lino becomes enraged when he learns this, and manages to break free from the handcuffs by using 2 iron rods he retrieves from under his chair. He fights off a dozen policemen and escapes. Despite Lino's escape, Orsky continues to play against him, and tells Julia that Lino is a traitor and a fugitive. This news leaves Marco feeling depressed. Marco sits in depression, caught off guard by the brutal actions of his friend. He's afraid of getting caught up in their schemes. However, Orsky assures him that he has everything under control, and they have nothing to fear at the warehouse where the crew work, and where the burnt-out car of Charis was delivered. Meanwhile, Julia mourns her comrade's loss, but suddenly Lino shows up. He confesses to her what really happened: Orsky framed him and shot Charis. However, Julia doesn't believe him, and a fight ensues between them. She's convinced that Lino is the criminal, but he turns out to be more cunning, as he takes out the cuffs from Julia's back pocket and stealthily cuffs her hand to the car. Suddenly, Leno realizes that the burnt-out car is not Charis's car, as the rims do not match. He drives away hastily. When the police arrive at the scene of Charis's murder, Orsky and Marco are already there. Julia informs them of Leno's words, but does not believe them herself. Orsky manipulates Julia by assuring her that Leno only wants to trick her into helping him escape, as they were romantically involved. He promises to keep their relationship a secret. Meanwhile, Leno sneaks into a junkyard. He quietly approaches a car to retrieve some weapons, but he is noticed at the same time. Leno reveals that he knows they did not burn Charis's car and messed up, as Oresky's bullet is still inside the car. This destabilizes them, and Quentin sees that they are putting Leno in the back of another car, with the intention to eliminate him. However, Quentin puts the car in reverse and speeds up, hitting the car from behind, which throws the guy at the back out of the car. Both Leno and Quentin escape from the scene. Commissioner Moss is restoring order in Charis's office at the warehouse, and dismisses the crew, despite Oresky's objections. As they make their way back from the junkyard, Leno and his younger brother argue about who is responsible for the mess they are in. Quentin interjects and reveals that he knows where Charis's Renault is hidden, on a farm where he stashed it himself. Meanwhile, Orsky and Marco discover two men in the trunk of a car. Orsky shoots one of them and orders Marco to take care of the other. In fear for his life, the captive tells Marco the truth: they did not burn the car. Marco listens carefully and then shoots the captive anyway. Julia wastes no time in investigating Leno's claim that the burnt car wasn't Charis's. However, when she rushes to inform Commissioner Moss, she faces skepticism when Moss gets a call informing him that Leno shot down two more men. Moss orders Julia to stay put at the warehouse, because Orsky informed Moss of her romantic involvement with Leno. In the meantime, Orsky is planning to finish off Moss, and he confides in Marco, who is increasingly distrusting of his friend. Marco feels a knot in his stomach as he listens to Oresky's plan, and the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He fears that he is just as much a witness to the events as the others. Leno contacts Julia to convince her that he didn't murder the two people at the dump site, and arranges a meeting with her. Julia's heart pounds in her chest as she answers the phone, and her palms grow clammy with sweat. She understands that she could be considered an accomplice to Leno, but decides to meet him, arming herself beforehand. As she drives to the meeting spot, she grips the steering wheel tightly, trying to calm her nerves. When she arrives, she surveys the area, scanning for any signs of danger as she notices that two cops are following her, but thanks to Quentin, she manages to evade the tail and reach Leno. Leno, citing Quentin as a witness, asks him to describe the real story to Julia. He says that he was a foundling who spent his life in foster homes, and met Leno there. Leno taught him everything he knows, but ended up in prison because of him. Now, Leno could end up back in prison once again because of Quentin. Quentin explains that he works at the dump site to pay off his debts, and prepares cars for go-fast operations. That morning, Leno arrived at the dump site with Charis, who wanted to take Quentin away. But another cop showed up and shot Charis. The sound of the gunshot echoed in their ears, and they all froze in terror. Leno offers Julia a choice: if she arrests them now, Orsky will end them and frame her. Alternatively, she can go with him, and they will return together with evidence against Orsky. Julia's mind races as she weighs her options, her breathing quickening and her palms sweating. She looks at Leno, studying his expression for any signs of deceit, and eventually agrees to help him. As Moss arrives at the landfill, he discovers two lifeless bodies, belonging to the organizers of Go Fast. Orsky blames Leno for their murders. Julia decides to assist Leno and Quentin, but notices surveillance on their car. She surrenders herself to the authorities, while Leno and Quentin rush to the site without her, to retrieve Charis's car. Orsky reports Julia's involvement in helping Leno escape, leading Commissioner Moss to believe that Julia is traitor. Meanwhile, Marco heads to the farm to search for Leno and Quentin. On the farm, Leno and Quentin break a lock to a warehouse, and Leno goes in, to find nothing, but when he turns back, he is shocked to see that Quentin is missing. He goes to another house, where he sees Quentin retrieve a bag filled with money and suggest running away, but Leno is fixated on finding the car. Quentin is frustrated, saying that they can buy 10,000 cars from this much money, and distracted, he steps outside carelessly, and is shot in the chest by Marco. Leno, dodging Marco, finds a shotgun, but with no bullets. Marco fires a shot and charges in, so Lino, using the shotgun as a mallet, fights Marco. As Lino and Marco fight, Quentin crawls away somewhere, wounded. Lino confronts Marco and manages to overpower him. Despite wanting to take Marco's life, Lino handcuffs him instead, then discovers Quentin's lifeless body, resting beside an old tractor, with a rope clenched in his hand. The rope leads to a haystack. While looking into it, Lino locates the car and calls Julia, but Orsky answers, as he confiscated Julia's phone earlier. Lino reveals to him a shocking secret, that Charis's car was not burned. Lino drives Charis's car into the barn, equips it with a metal ram with spikes, and sets off on a journey. Orsky and his team set up a checkpoint on the road to intercept Lino, and also call upon the car tuned by Lino's hands for assistance. A race ensues on the highway, with Orsky giving orders to close in on Lino, hoping to prevent him from turning back. Lino's new modification turns out to be intellectually frightening, as he hooked the spikes on the back of the police car, and by hitting the brakes, Lino rips out half of the police car. He hooks himself again, keeping the police car attached to front of his car. As Lino approaches the checkpoint, the crew of the police car scream over the radio, warning not to fire, as Lino uses them as a shield. But Orsky is not willing to let his enemy go, and orders them to shoot. However, the bullets cannot stop Lino as he blasts through the blockade, and the enraged Orsky chases after him. In the midst of the turmoil, operational information quickly reaches Commissioner Moss. She leaves the keys to the handcuffs on the table, allowing Julia to free herself and escape. Moss gives a clear order for Orsky not to touch Lino, as a team has already been sent after him. But Orsky wants to finish the job on his own terms. Julia also realizes that Orsky could harm Lino, and asks her colleagues not to let him reach the guy. She finds them on the waterfront and drives after them. Orsky rams Lino, but Julia pulls up alongside him and prevents him from forcing Lino off the road. After that, Lino manages to break away, and Julia rams the corrupt cop. The pursuit comes to an end, and Orsky crawls out of his wrecked car and pulls the pin of a hand grenade he stashed beforehand. As Lino approaches him with fists raised, the rescue throws the grenade into the Renault. The grenade explodes, the car catches fire, and Lino jumps behind the wheel and heads to the warehouse. Fortunately, Commissioner Moss and her assistant manage to extinguish the fire, and Lino comes to the center. The investigation begins. Orsky goes home, and collects money, weapons, and his belongings, and plans to run away, leaving his wife and young child behind. Julia hands Lino documents confirming his innocence and sees him off. In the end, Charis's red Renault is set up as a memorial.